And hello again, everybody. So today we're going to have our final video in the series on the Silk Roads, and we're going to be getting into Africa and really showing how now we have a full hemispheric trade, and let's just get into it. So East Africa is where a lot of this is going to begin as far as the Silk Roads are concerned. Of course, that makes sense because East Africa does border the Indian Ocean. And again, the demand for goods, the trade is going to result in the growth of cities and empires. They are created because of that. And we've talked about in my previous videos about the Swahili city-states and other areas in this particular zone that are created as a result. And they're trading everything. I have here giraffes because that's really, really important. I know it sounds crazy, but giraffes were something that were even traded to Bengal and other areas in the East. So you've got a lot of trade going on, and you have a lot of successful trade going on, and these guys are good if they can actually transport giraffes, and the giraffes don't die. That is actually a picture of a giraffe that made it all the way from Africa to China. So that's pretty significant. These city-states were developed and they were generally ruled by kings. However, they weren't, what's different here, they weren't at any choke points. And for whatever reason, like the Swahili city-state, they don't develop any ships of their own. So everybody comes to them. So they kind of have to cater to these foreign traders because otherwise they don't get access to anything because they themselves are not going out. I don't really have an explanation as to why they don't do it. I'm just letting you know that they don't. So there are no ocean-going African voyages during this particular time period. Now, you do have some cultural changes in East Africa. Before, the languages were primarily Bantu-based, but they were never written. And then the Arabs come, so now written languages are actually based in Arabic, so it's a little bit different. Islam is widely adopted in East Africa, with the exception of Ethiopia. They will remain out and predominantly Christian with a small group of Jewish people as well. But Islam is still the major feature of East Africa today. And these states also paved the way for interior cultures like Great Zimbabwe to trade without themselves having to conquer and expand to the coast. So that was kind of like a win-win. Now, so that's East Africa. Now we go over to North Africa, which is going to get hooked in through the Mediterranean trade. And again, this trade does go back to ancient times. North Africa had been part of the Roman Empire, and of course part of it had been part of the Egyptian empires as well. Now the newer Arab empires control this area. Products like copper, dates, and salt. And for the most part, you have the population were nomadic desert dwellers, traders and herdsmen, some livestock, and that they basically travel between oases, gathering goods and trading them as well. Sub-Saharan Africa, this is a little bit different. So we have some different types of crops that are being grown here: millet, sorghum, yams, and kola nuts. This is predominantly going to be river trade. The Niger River system, Niger River systems, as well as the other smaller rivers, is going to be really crucial. So you do have some boats, but not ships. Ships go in the ocean, boats stay on a river. Got it? Awesome. So trade centers will start to develop along the rivers, but they're not quite cities. They're more just centers for trade. All of this stuff, east, north, and sub-Saharan Africa, will then get combined because of the camel. The camel comes in from Arabia, and it completely changes the game. They can go up to 10 days without water. Their feet are basically designed to walk in the sand, and the trans-Saharan trade is created as a result of the camel. Gold, 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 and then salt, salt, salt. And again, a familiar theme, the development of cities and empires will occur as a result. Now, these are the caravan routes. Now, we have talked about, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. I talked about the Hausa. But now we look at some of these major cities, places like Fez and Marrakesh in Morocco, Wadani, Timbuktu, Gao, Djenné, Niana, Kano, Combe Soleil, which was actually like two cities, but like kind of unified into one. And so all of this is possible because of the camel. And God, they have a lot of gold. And gosh, they have a lot of salt. And this is what people really, really want. You get all sorts of myths that develop of these kings and King Solomon's mines and all sorts of stuff going on in Central Africa. Also, obviously, like journeys by guys like Mansa Musa doesn't hurt. But these are the routes that are created. They tie into the Mediterranean. They will go south, and some will eventually go west as well and bring it all together. And we can once again thank the camel. Now, we do see massive cultural changes here. Islam, okay, Islam is crucial here. Islam is very, very big, but the traditions were slightly different. I discussed that in some of my other videos. The relationship toward women, the keeping of certain kind of gods around, some of the interactions that were more traditional in, like a guy like Ibn Battuta, when he came to Mali, was like, what are you people doing? Like, this is not the Islam that I know. So some of the prayers are different. They're not as like locked into certain things all the time, which again, I covered in my Western African videos here. But so that's going to be a little bit different. Royal families and elites will then come to dominate society. Societies were a little more egalitarian prior to this, and now we have our standard stratification that you see in so many different areas. Women really get hammered here. I mean, it is all about the patriarchy. It is dominated. Powerful women come to be destructive, or sorry, they become distrusted. They're seen as like temptresses. Some are seen as witches, just like we see in Europe. And so their social status goes down. So they're not going to be in politics, but women are still seen as the main farmers and weavers. So in village life, women are crucial. They're not restricted in their movements or interactions with men. Okay, so that's going to be really, really different than some of the Islamic empires. That's why they didn't like it, despite that Islam was here. So as you can see this picture on the right, this is an artistic depiction of an West African town, and you see a lot of things. You see gold, you see warriors, but you see women walking around, and that really is something that you would see in these towns. Very cosmopolitan, lots of people from all over, lots of goods, and Africa, man, they're on the scene. But the slave trade, I mentioned it in my previous video, and it is huge. The Romans were really, really big on that, coming out of North Africa. Early on, women were primarily enslaved as domestic servants. Eventually, males were brought in, and many times they served as state officials, craftsmen, and miners. The state officials think like the Delhi Sultanate. Miners think salt mines, which is brutal, and if you're a miner in a salt mine, you're going to die. That's why they use slaves. But then it starts to change as agriculture and agricultural goods, as well as the salt and gold that needs to be mined. The stuff needs to be grown. It's hard work. We are now going to start to use slaves by around 1100. And used as agricultural laborers. By around 1100, the slave state starts to become a big thing, which had been in the Mediterranean earlier, kind of died out, and then starts to really get going again with the Silk Roads. And between 1100 and 1400, as many as 5,500 slaves per year were being traded within Africa, as well as out to Arabic empires. So this lays the basis that then the Europeans are going to come in and take it to like all sorts of crazy levels. Now, what's a little bit different about this slave trade, it's still horrible. All slavery is bad. Some of the stereotypes and other issues about like inequality that we see about Africans or African descended people, that's a later thing. That's brought by the Europeans. Slaves are slaves are slaves as far as everybody else is concerned. And it's pretty terrible. And again, you're not your own person. But this is something as the changing world. So here's a negative of that trade. Of course, we already talked about disease and stuff like that. But within Africa, a slave economy, developed at that Arabic, the Arabic empires and the Islamic empires are used as well. And we also see slavery in Mamluks, and we see slavery in India, we see slavery in China. Sadly, the fact you go all the way back, man, farming is hard and people don't want to do it, and so they use slaves. And so that's going to finish up everything. So now with the Silk Roads, we have one, hemispheric-wide trade network. All of these folks are involved, and there are very few hidden areas anymore. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed that. I will talk to you soon.